Well, I know we've all read Leviticus, so I thought, hopefully some good things will be brought back to mind. Leprosy was just like this bad plague. That one thing to note about leprosy is that it really changes a man. And like when people had leprosy, they weren't really allowed to come into the camp. I don't think they could even come into Jerusalem. No, they couldn't come into Jerusalem. I'll read here. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of his flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean." And one interesting thing to note is that like it was always unclean in the flesh when it was like deep. It was like deep in the flesh and it spread. And sin is like really like that. And one other interesting thing is when it was just a scab, it notes that it wasn't deep in the flesh and it didn't spread, and God considered it clean. It says in verse 4, "If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut him up that hath the plague 7 days." This thing where the priest, in a lot of these cases of leprosy, they would always like separate it for a time, and I just couldn't help but think that it seems to represent like a thoroughness, and like God gives people time to see like if their sins will go away, like if they will work on their sins. "And the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days more." Seems to represent like this real thoroughness of what they would do if leprosy was found. It's just like real, like if it didn't spread, they do it again. They give more time. "And the priest shall look on him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark," it changed obviously, "and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after that he has been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreads in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy." There's more to like when leprosy was in the flesh. It's really interesting to read those. But one of the next cases of leprosy was when it was in a garment. And I couldn't help but think like it's just something spiritual, like something to do with our inner man. Peter mentions that like we all need to be like clothed in humility. And Paul said in 2 Corinthians, he said, "Let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and the spirit." This says, "The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen, whether it be in the warp or the woof or linen or woolen, whether in a leather or anything of leather. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or the woof or in leather, it is the plague of leprosy, and shall be showed to the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague, and shut it up that has the plague 7 days. And he shall look on the plague the 7th day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp, in the woof, the leather, or any work made of leather, it is the plague. The plague is a fretting leprosy. It is unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof or linen, anything of leather, wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy. It shall be burnt in the fire. This case of leprosy seemed to be pretty serious, because it talks about if they would have the garment and it didn't spread, they would still have to burn it. It wasn't it. In this case, it really had to be eradicated. And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp, and the woof, or anything of leather, the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed. And behold, if the plague has not changed color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in the fire. It is fret inward, whether it be bare within or without. And if the priest look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or that skin is leather, or out of the leather, or out of the warp, or out of the woof. And if it appear still in the garment, you shall burn it where the plague is with fire. Something about this took my mind to what Paul said in Hebrews. He said, "For the earth, with drinks in the rain that comes often upon it, and brings forth herbs useful for them by whom it is cultivated, receives blessings from God. But that which bears thorns and briars is rejected, and is nigh unto cursing, whose end is to be burned." One of the next cases of leprosy was when it was in a house. And it says here, when you be come into the land of Canaan, which I give you for a possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in the house of the land of your possession. And I guess I just couldn't help but think this is talking about a church, because it's specifically talking about this house in the land of Canaan, or this church that's in the realms of God's kingdom. And like Peter says, we're all these stones. And one thing they would do is when there was a plague in the house, they would go in and they take everything out of the house, and they would look at the stones, and eventually the stones that had the leprosy, they would take them out of the house, and it says they would put them in an unclean place without the city, and then they would replace the stones. It says, "And I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession, and he that owns the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, It seems to me there is, as it were, a plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priests go into it to see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go into the house, and he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house with hollow strakes, greenish or reddish, which in sight are lower than the wall." Think that lower than the wall means deeper than the surface. "Then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again the 7th day, and shall look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the walls, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which the plague is, and they shall cast them in an unclean place without the city. And he shall cause the house to be scraped within round about, and they shall pour out the dust that they scrape off without the city into an unclean place. And they shall take other stones, and put them in the place of those stones, and he shall take other mortar, and shall plaster the house." Then, if leprosy was to come back, then they would eventually just tear down the house. Couldn't help but think, the churches, if they didn't repent, Jesus was just going to take their lampstand away. And I had this thought that there's actually this real simple solution to leprosy, and it's Jesus. He's this ultimate solution. Whatever sins of the flesh, if we just eat Christ, those things will be healed. I thought about those 10 lepers when they came to Jesus, Like one way they were healed is that they obeyed him. Like Jesus told them to do something and they obeyed him. And it said as they were going, they seen that they were healed. I thought of there was a woman in Mark. She had a sickness in her body, and she went to all these other places, these other physicians, and it just made it worse. But then she comes, and all she did was touch Jesus, and she was healed. It said, and a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. When she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind, and touched his garment. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the crowd, and said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. And the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace, and be whole of your plague. I thought, like this woman, she, like her flesh, it says the blood is the life. And in her flesh, she was like losing her life. Like her life was just coming out of her. And I thought like lust and pride, hatred, bitterness, covetousness, strife, and contention, like they're all these like bad issues of the flesh. And they just seem to like take our life away, take the life out of the body. And it's like if we just like put Jesus' clothes on, like those things would just be dried up. There was the law for the cleansing of a leper is really, it's really a beautiful cleansing ceremony that they would go through. I thought like Jesus said this thing. He said he that repents and is baptized will be saved. And in the cleansing ceremony of a leper, you kind of see that same like pattern. Like leprosy was be cleansed, the priest would go and get him outside the city, and what he would do, he would take the blood of the sacrifice, he'd sprinkle it on him, and then the man would have to wash, and then he was allowed to go back into the camp. It says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper, then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And then the blood of that they would sprinkle on him 7 times, and pronounce him clean. Then it says in verse 8, and he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, and shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. This next part is really interesting. Like he washed himself twice, and it seems to represent like this thoroughness. Like the Christian walk will like thoroughly wash us. And then he would do more than just shave off his hair. It says, but it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave off all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows. And it's like this man's identity like really changed significantly. Like I'm sure if some of us were to come in here and like shave off all of our hair, beard, and eyebrows, we would probably think like, whoa, that's like a new person. Like, who is that guy? And he shall wash his clothes, also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. And then on the 8th day they would do another sacrifice, and the blood of it, it was that part where they would apply it to his big toe on his foot, his thumb on his right hand, and his ear, And in the same way, they would take the oil and apply it to his toe, his thumb, and his ear, and then the priest would take the oil and sprinkle it before the Lord 7 times. And it's really beautiful. The rest of the oil they would pour on the head of the one that was cleansed. Then I guess the last thing I wanted to read was Psalm 51. It says, "Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you shall make me to know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which you have broken may rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me." That's all I wanted to share. God bless you all.
Thank you, Brother Daron. That was a really refreshing picture and comparison of something that can be kind of mystifying to us in the Old Testament and how it relates to the new birth of a Christian. It was very intriguing. It's interesting that leprosy is an ancient disease that still exists today, and I'm not sure when exactly this happened, but it is now a curable disease where it hasn't been for 2,000 years. I think that's pretty recent history. And from what I've read about it, it takes a lot of discipline to be cured of it, because I think the regimen that you have to take, and I think it depends on how far the disease is advanced and other things, it can take, I think, up to a year of treatment. And so because of that, and because it takes so much discipline, to this day there are still leper colonies, and there are still places where leprosy exists. There are people that can't be made clean by way of medicine. And I don't know why, and I would really hesitate to. I'm sure that there are a lot of issues that would make it hard, either a lack of access, but even with access, there can be a lot of social issues that could make somebody not able to be cured of a disease like leprosy. But one thing that's interesting is if the disease advances far enough, is its effects, even if it is cured, are irreversible, like the loss of cartilage in the nose or the way the skin is disfigured. It lasts a lifetime. And I often think that about sin. I often think that the effects of sin, while they can be cleansed and cured, some of their effects can last a lifetime. And I guess one thing, maybe you know, Brother Daron, or maybe somebody knows, what is it in clothing or garments or even the walls of a house exactly that the priest is looking for, that he's going to see? I know at least in a house it gives some description of different colors he would see that would indicate a disease is present. I wonder if anybody knows. Thank you for sharing, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Daron. I appreciated that, and I think our understanding of the new covenant and the ways of God can be really deepened and enriched when we look at those Old Testament, like the laws, in the right way, and we see them as almost like a prophecy, as the New Testament says, or as Paul would say, the law is good if one uses it lawfully. I think there's so much there to learn from. And one of the things the last time I was reading or listening through Leviticus, and I was listening to that portion of how those diseases were to be examined, it occurred to me that I think and they should be likened, like I think leprosy and these, whatever it was, mold or something on the houses and the clothes, whatever all that was, is to be likened to sin. I think that's pretty obvious. Fault or something like that. But then then it occurred to me like that. It seems like there's this. There was supposed to be this careful examination. Like the priest should carefully examine it, and he should take note of the condition of it, and then 7 days later he should examine it again, and maybe 7 days later again, and the action taken had a lot to do with two things, like how deep it was, and whether it was spreading. And I thought, like, we could, if we examine our own lives, or if we examine like the faults or sins within our own life, or within the family, or within the church, like all of us would recognize no one is faultless. No one doesn't have some of these blemishes, and yet the examination should be careful, consistent, and the real danger is when it's more than skin deep, and especially when it spreads. Like different action needs to be taken, different. Whether that just means like spreading, like in my own life, if I see it becoming worse, if I see a habit that I have maybe, or if it becomes worse, if it becomes more frequent, if it affects other areas, like if my whatever it would be, if it would also make me weaker and duller, or less victorious in other areas, like anyway, that was one thought I had that we learned from that. So anyway, I appreciate that. Also, just there is not a main message today, so we can share comments on what Daron shared, or other testimonies, or things you want to share about. I had one thing I thought to share about that. Well, I hadn't really thought to share about it, but then Daron even read that passage this morning that included the wave and the heave offering, which was something I was just looking into recently. Like, what is that? What is the wave offering? What is the heave offering? What's the meaning of that? And my study was not very extensive. I just kind of briefly looked at it, but at least what I understand now. So the heave and the wave offering were a part of the peace offering. So there's I think there's 5 offerings. There's the burnt offering, there's the sin offering, there's the peace offering, whatever the others are. But the wave and the heave offering were like part of the peace offering that the offerer would bring. Let's say I'm the person offering this peace offering, and I bring a sheep or something, and I bring it to the priest, and I believe the peace offering might be the only offering that I end up eating some of it. I offer it, but what the priest does is he takes the breast piece of the meat and the thigh, which are kind of the two choicest pieces, and the breast offering is considered the wave offering. And so the priest takes it. I think the priest takes it, or then the offerer, but I think the priest would take it, and he would put it to the altar and then bring it back. Put it to the altar and bring it back in this waving motion, as kind of a ceremony of like, I bring this to God, He gives it back. I bring this to God, He gives it back. And the thigh, which is a heavier piece of meat, like is the heave offering, which gets its name. If this information, I looked at a few sources. Somebody can correct me if my information's not right, but it gets his name from the motion that the priest would take and offer it up and back down, and in that heaving motion of like offering it to God and God gives it back, offering it to God and God gives it back. It gets his name as the heave offering, and then unlike say the burnt offering, the sin offering, that have to do with atonement, like this one is actually like the priest gets to eat the thigh and the breast, but the rest of the, if it's a lamb, the rest of the lamb is eaten by the person who offered it and his family or whoever he gathers with him. And it's kind of like this offering of peace, fellowship, where there's a communal thing going on between you and God and the priest and the people. We give this peace to God, and He gives His peace to us. We are at peace with each other, with God, and with God, with each other that we're around. And anyway, I was blessed with that that ceremonial expression of that. And then when Daron read that passage in Leviticus this morning that included some of that, I thought I'd share those things that I read. I think that's it, just that I have to share, but feel free, any brothers, to share whatever you think might be edifying or encouraging.